2021 is almost over, and we are going to be looking at all the types of disastrous weather that occurred. More specifically, we're actually going to be looking at the most severe weather event per month. We will be looking at this from an international perspective. Not saying that all geographic regions are going to be covered, but we will try our best to include all of our areas of the world. This does include the United States for a lot of these months, but it's not solely about the United States, is what I'm trying to say. Now, if you want to know why sunrise and sunset video is going to come out using time and date, that's going to have to wait a little bit, but I should get to it shortly. So, anyway, January. What was the most severe weather event, extreme weather event, in the month of January? Well, I might say Cyclone Eloise. Cyclone Eloise was a cyclone that caused 27 deaths and $10 million in damage. The Category 2 cyclone struck Madagascar, and then it actually continued in a southwesterly direction until it wound up hitting the Southeast African coast, and it wound up causing a lot of damage there. However, its lack of notability partially stems from the fact that that's kind of typical for a storm in the area, and it didn't necessarily do anything abnormal. It was actually nominated for in the news, and it failed. Now, that total at the time was only half of what's known right now, but even if they had known, I mean, Cyclone Jobo caused 22 deaths, and it was still not nautical. To be fair, they didn't know about the 22 deaths, but even when they did, it could pretty easily be fit in there. Jobo failed notability, even with 22 deaths, because again, these kinds of storms aren't particularly rare, and also not entirely sure if they're from Jobo or not. You'll see this with a lot of North Indian Ocean cyclones where they fail notability even when they cause deaths. So that is January. February, of course, it's going to be Winter Storm Uri, which of course did affect the United States. I said I would try to look at this from an international impact. That did not mean that I was going to say everything had to be outside the United States. Of course it has to be this. This winter storm caused at least 237 deaths, with estimates putting some of the numbers close to 1,000. It cost $185 billion in Texas alone, as well as $1.5 billion in Mexico. This was because of the snow, which proved to be such a catastrophic problem because the power lines weren't winterized, and Texas's power line was isolated from everyone else. The U.S. government only estimates about $20 billion from the storm, but Texas estimates this damage total is indeed much higher than what the U.S. government is putting forth. Might believe the U.S. a little bit more on this one, given the situation in Texas. While the gerrymandering wasn't necessarily the most extreme from a partisan perspective, as it did leave 13 Democratic seats, it was definitely a racial gerrymander, which is banned, but you also have to have extreme evidence to wind up proving it. It wasn't like the more extreme partisan gerrymanders that we've seen in Ohio, North Carolina, or Illinois, but rather it was an attempt at racial gerrymandering, which we're going to see. Texas, too, is going to be doing a lot of suppression, and Texas Democrats are actually really going to be screwed unless the federal government steps in, and I feel like they have more important things to be doing as of right now. I mean, like, Texas might actually, all the Democrats serving there, Greg Abbott is calling for them to be arrested, and it will take U.S. intervention to stop all this, which I'm not totally sure they're not going to do, but I would say it's somewhat unlikely. But this winter storm, we also saw Ted Cruz make the famous trip to Cancun, which he got widely condemned for by both Republicans and Democrats alike. Even Greg Abbott lost a fair amount of popularity after the incident, where, 10 million customers lost power, half of them in Texas, about 45% of them were in Mexico. This did also cause a fair amount of damage in Oregon, New Mexico, and Colorado, but, this coincided with a cold wave that, on its own volition, also caused a fair amount of deaths in the northern plains and $600 million in damage. And the next storm after this, Winter Storm Viola, added on to the damage, causing an additional 29 deaths and $2 billion in damage. However, separating the impacts out is somewhat difficult between the storms. Now, as far as March goes, I'm tempted to say the March 24th to 28th tornado sequence. I mean, between the two parts, we can estimate it caused about $3 billion in damage. It spawned an EF4 tornado in Noonan, one of only 3 this year. Wait, is this ice? I mean, I think about freezing this morning. Yeah, that's ice. I mean, if you think about it, it is like 34 degrees outside right now. Very cold. Albeit for December, it's actually kind of normal. But it is cold. I'll say that 34 degrees might be normal, but it doesn't mean that's by any means toasty. And I think the wind chill is like 28 or something like that. It's just really cold outside. Anyway, this system caused 8 deaths in tornadoes, 6 in the EF3 in Ohotochi, Alabama, 1 in the EF2 in Carthage, Texas, and then 1 in the EF4 in Noonan, Georgia. This tornado was this outbreak also saw a straight line wind death in Indiana and deadly flooding along I-24 in Tennessee that wound up killing 4 people. It fails to get in the news because the death toll was only 5 from the tornadoes, and even then, with only 8 tornadic deaths, the other ones just would not have been factored in. Also, 14 deaths isn't really notable enough for a weather system anyway. I was split between this and Cyclone Eloise, given how Eloise was a Category 5 in the South Pacific that wound up brushing just past the Solomon Islands, I think, something like that, as a Category 3 that wound up causing $200 million in damage, 2 injuries, and 70,000 power outages. But in the end, they did pick the storm complex over Iran. But for April, we will see something in the Australian region. This specifically being Cyclone Eloise. Eloise caused 271 deaths, but we don't know how many were in Indonesia versus East Timor. It affected this region as a severe tropical storm, and then it caused about $250 million in damage. It caused another $250 million damage and death as the system made landfall in the Midwest region of Western Australia, which is the first time a cyclone had made it that far southwest in the country since 1999. Eloise would be the 3rd deadliest system in the Australian region. The 1973 Flora cyclone being the deadliest, not so the 2nd deadliest. And some of the damage in this area was catastrophic. The system also caused a fair amount of rainfall in Perth, but nothing deadly. Moving on a little bit more of a happy note, May is going to be Cyclone Tokte. Like Eloise also made it in the news, this caused 174 deaths across the western part of India, and it coincided with the highest spike in COVID at that time. It also cost $2.1 billion now, which is a fair amount of damage for India. I know for US sector that's barely anything, but for an Indian perspective, that actually is really a lot of money. This was a Category 4, this is the Saffir-Simpson scale, and Eloise was just the 1 at its peak. 3 on the Australian scale. So this is considered an extremely severe cyclonic storm by the people there due to its wind speed. And it would prove to have done catastrophic damage when the system bore down. Now, June, we didn't see anything too bad. I might say the South Moravia tornado for killing 6 people and causing $7 million damage. Oh, yeah, as you can see, 34 degrees. The South Mobile tornado also cost $700 million now when adjusted for U.S. dollars. It was it was probably the worst tornado on record in the Czech Republic. 6 deaths, 200 people injured. F4 tornado. And also it caused an injury in the small outbreak of 7 tornadoes. It caused an injury in Poland. So, a very nasty system. Oh, if you're wondering how many tornadoes were formed in the March 24th to 28th sequence, then the answer is 43. And if you're wondering how many injuries there were 37. Anyway, as far as the next system goes, that would also prove to have done a lot of damage, and be July. July is going to be split between the 2021 European floods and the 2021 Henan floods. I'm going to go with the Henan floods though for 2 reasons. First of all, Europe was already covered for June. And I have a feeling, not sure at the moment I'm recording this right now, but I have a feeling we're going to wind up mentioning Europe again. We might not. China, though, is more than likely not going to be mentioned, even though Asia probably will be mentioned. Though, again, I'm not sure how I want to plan this out, given the abundance of very severe cyclones in December. So I'm not sure how much we necessarily want to plan this out. So, as far as they go, both made it in the news. The 2021 Maharashtra floods caused 250 deaths in India, and it also made it in the news, but I'm just not gonna mention that. I'm probably gonna do the Henan floods for this one, because as the European floods caused over 230 deaths, it also made the news, but so the Henan floods made it twice actually. It caused 230 deaths, and it caused a fair amount of damage, about 10 billion. The Henan floods also caused about 10 billion. It caused 302 deaths, and it coincided with Typhoon Infa, which caused 6 deaths and $1 billion in damage on its own volition. And it added on to the already existing problem of flooding in Henan in July. But again, this is a Chinese flood, so it's not like we really have an abundant amount of information on it. The European floods did affect more countries, so I guess for July, I'm actually going to consider them to be tie, because they're really about as impactful as the other. Now, what about for August? August is going to be Hurricane Ida, and because I really can't think of something for September, I think September is also going to be Hurricane Ida. But this is because Ida caused destructive impacts in both months. On the 29th, Ida caused 39 people to die in the southeast, where it caused at least $15 billion in damage in Louisiana alone. And it made landfall as a Category 4. In September, it caused at least $16 billion now to 57 deaths due to extreme flash flooding in the New York metropolitan area. Already with ground saturated from a very active summer for precipitation, and especially due to Hurricane Henri, which made landfall only 10 days prior. September 1st, the night of September 1st, it proved to be too much for the ground to handle, where it caused a lot of deaths. This does include a tornadic death in Upper Dublin Township, Pennsylvania, where an EF2 tornado caused a tree to fall on someone's house, killing the person inside. Ida also spawned in New Jersey's first EF3 tornado in over 3 decades. New Jersey, though, while it saw 27 deaths, it was all from the flooding, and because some people say it might have actually caused 30 deaths, this means Ida was the second deadliest storm in New Jersey, behind only Sandy. So Ida caused catastrophic damage in both August and September. Combined, adding 20 deaths in Venezuela in August, Ida caused 115 deaths, and it caused $65 billion in damage. Because sometimes you can say there's damage to the U.S., but the pieces don't exactly add up. Now, for October, we didn't see anything too destructive. Because this is the only weather event that made it in the news section, I might just say Tropical Storm Kompasu, because it caused 44 deaths and $127 million across the Philippines, and we really don't have anything better to put, in my opinion. Ida also made it in the news. It made it in September, though, not August. But it did include the Louisiana impact stuff. November, and this is a little confusing. November, not sure about anything comes to my mind too specifically. I mean, the Tamil Nadu floods caused 41 deaths, but it still wasn't nominated, so of course it wasn't posted. But I don't really think we had anything going on in November. December, so this week actually had 3 weather events posted. But the Malaysia floods, even though they caused 46 deaths, wasn't too severe. By the way, some of these floods are like tropical system floods out from Tropical Depression 29 West. The Tamil Nadu floods were from BOBO5. Now, Typhoon Rai caused about 400 deaths mainly in the Philippines, and it caused some in Vietnam. $730 million damage. It wasn't unprecedented even for a December cyclone, but it was certainly destructive. I'll say that. Very destructive. This is a Category 5 equivalent on the Saffir-Simpson scale. And unlike Chanthu, which also made landfall there, but Typhoon Chanthu made it on a relatively underpopulated island, so it actually wound up causing only $750,000 across the country and no deaths. This isn't what caused any deaths in general, but near record-breaking rainfall in South Korea and Japan would cause it to do an additional $30 million in damage, which still isn't that much. Typhoon Chanthu was not very destructive, but Typhoon Rai was, and Typhoon Rai wound up causing an extreme death toll across the Philippines. Extreme damage toll too. Now, as far as December though, we do have one other thing. The December 10th to 11th tornado outbreak saw 69 tornadoes going up to in EF4. We had 2 of them. We saw 89 deaths plus 3 non-tornadic. 58 of them coming from the Western Kentucky EF4 alone. 7 of them coming from the tornado, the one in 3 states, the tri-state one, I guess, in Tennessee, Arkansas, and Missouri. 17 in the EF3 in Bowling Green. 6 in the EF3 in Edwardsville. 1 in the EF3 in Defiance, Missouri. A super duper long track EF3 in Tennessee and Kentucky. Even though it didn't cause any deaths, it did cause 13 injuries. We have 118 injuries in total, and that number is likely much higher. As for damage estimates, we don't really have any super duper reliable ones. AccuWeather is saying 18 billion, but they're not super reliable. I mean, they said Ida caused 95 billion and Henri caused 12 billion, so I'm not going to trust what AccuWeather says for a second. Some estimate 3 billion in insured damage, some say 8.5 billion. There's too many estimates, so it's really unknown for now, and unless and until a government agency comes out with one. So there's NOAA or the NWS. It's possible that AON might come out with one, and generally we do use AON until something more reliable comes out, because again, but the KCC we're not so sure if we're going to use. I'll be looking for some damage estimates though and seeing what I find.